Welcome to Eat, Drink, Think. I'm Amy O'Neill Hauk. In this podcast from Edible Communities, a network of magazines published across North America, we celebrate all things local and sustainable in the food world. Today's episode is sponsored by the Farmers Market Coalition, which this summer is celebrating the 25th anniversary of Farmers Market Week, August 4th through 10th. We're speaking with Sadrina Jalal, a leader at the intersection of food, community, and innovation. Sadrina is the founder of Sage D Consulting and the owner of Atlanta Leadership Consulting. She cultivates and delivers transformational experiences for executive teams, nonprofit boards, and impact-driven professionals. She brought her expertise to the Farmers Market Coalition as a lead developer of the anti-racist toolkit for farmers markets. We're also joined by Nino Budabin McGowan. Nino has a PhD in English literature focused on the socio-cultural history of soil, and at the Farmers Market Coalition coordinates the creation, aggregation, and sharing of resources and networks in support of farm direct operators and local food systems. They have worked closely with Sadrina to center equity in the organization's initiatives. We'll talk with Sadrina and Nino about the toolkit, the work that has happened since it was developed, and about the space for equity work that markets create in communities. Sadrina, Nino, welcome to Eat, Drink, Think.
Thanks so much for having us.
Hi, glad to be here.
Well, Sadrina, you've been working with farmers markets for some time, including as the founding director of the Georgia Farmers Market Association. Can you tell us a bit about your personal history with food and farms and what led you to market work?
Absolutely. I was raised on the coast of Savannah on a barrier island called Burnside Island, where, we had the ocean in our backyard. And so just a very close relationship and understanding of, just the opportunity that we have to convene with nature as it relates to food, but not really an understanding of food as an opportunity for healing or even an opportunity directly, for community. So my introduction to working with both food systems really came as a response to a health crisis that I had personally. And, I was seeking answers on how to address my challenges holistically. And I was led to the farmers market, where I learned just of the incredible healing properties of food and really started to see farmers as my pharmacist. So that's kind of where my relationship with food began.
Great. And how did that personal journey move into a professional one?
Yeah, so when I started going to the local farmers market, at this point, I moved and started raising my family in Atlanta, in the metro Atlanta area. And my quest, and my subsequent opportunity to address my health challenges successfully, I was actually very successful in using food as medicine, really made me start to think. My background professionally was in education. So I'm a teacher by training and at that point by trade. And, I just had a lot of questions. And so I started doing more research and also paying attention to the spaces around me, my neighborhood, my community, and realizing that, a lot of us were missing this really incredible connection between our food and our health. And so I just started having informal conversations. That those conversations became more structured. I started to get to know farmers personally, and one thing led to the other. I think the I say all the time that I was like an accidental executive director of the Georgia Farmers Market Association, but the need was there, and I was in a position to address some of the concerns that we all had, and we were able to develop a really nice network of farmers markets. Since the markets in my community existed, they just were not as focused on using the farmers markets as an opportunity for community or to raise awareness and access to fresh local food.
I love that story because no matter how many farmers and farms we're able to cultivate and local farms and local food systems, we'll probably always have more eaters than farmers. And your story
Right.
is one of an eater who's become so engaged in this process and in these systems. And I think that makes it feel accessible to people in a way that's maybe not necessarily about growing. So that's pretty cool. Nino, those of our listeners who have access to farmers markets likely frequent one or two, or if they're lucky, a handful in their region. And because of that, they might not think of markets as part of a connected network or a movement. Can you introduce us to the Farmers Market Coalition and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. The Farmers Market Coalition is the only national organization supporting farmers market operators. Farmers markets, as you're saying, like folks think of them and experience them as really local, and that's what they are. They're places that are based out of community, that are often intended to create community, and that aspect of farmers markets missions is something that we, as in Cedrina and I, talk about all the time and think about all the time, and really center in the work that we try to do to support farmers markets. And often, farmers market operators, when they start a market, they're doing it for their community. They're doing it for themselves, for the other farmers they work with. They may be farmers, or they may be people who are trying to access local and fresh food. And so it really is like about that local connection, both economically and community-wise. And as farmers markets have developed or kind of, resurged since the 70s in America, that national community has really grown, and these individual markets all across the country have realized, how much they have to learn from each other and how much support they have to give to each other. There are state organizations supporting markets in many, but not all, states across the country. And we at the National Farmers Market Coalition see our mission as just supporting the work that farmers market operators are doing to create farmers markets across the country. And that includes creating resources. It includes kind of trying to answer questions. And a lot of it, is facilitating access to each other, because we have these brilliant, dedicated folks who are working incredibly hard to build markets, make them happen, to like create the space that you walk into that looks so pristine and perfect and well organized on, your Saturday or Wednesday or whenever you shop, that sprang like magic out of a parking lot in a lot of cases, or a park. And in order for that to happen, so many questions have to get answered, so many crises have to be managed, so many relationships have to be created and maintained. And so we see our job as supporting farmers market operators to do that work in the many, many ways that they have to do it locally. And because of course every community needs something different from their farmers market operators, but we try and take care of the stuff, connect people so that they can help each other take care of the stuff that can be shared as best practices. And then we also do advocacy work and policy work to try and support, farmers markets at the policy level, to make sure that, food policy keeps farmers markets in mind, SNAP policy keeps farmers markets in mind, and we try to provide best practices as we can see them and find them, and that includes the work that we get to do with Cedrina on equity. So making sure that as we're thinking about like the ways in which we see farmers markets changing and supporting their communities across the country, that we have a shared vision for how that looks. That's creating, helping to create the world that we all want to live in. So, yeah.
Cedrina, can you tell us more about the opportunity that farmers markets have to focus on and promote equity and food justice?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I realized was that with the incredible work that so many farmers market operators are doing on behalf of the entire community, farmers and eaters alike, I realized that we were not seeing, at least in my community, a cross section of, the people that exist and, attend school together, attend work together, attend church together, all these things that are happening in many cases, but not happening at the farmers market. The community that I lived in at the time that I really started working in farmers markets was probably 50 to 60% non-white. And the farmers market, by contrast, was almost entirely white, both in terms of vendors as well as shoppers. And so there was definitely a disconnect because, for it to be such a central part of any Saturday in
Mhm.
my community, but for there not to be people there, made me really think long and hard about why. And so I started to pay attention and consider some of the immigrant communities that were within my community, as well as just having informal conversations with people of color that I was connected to in our community. And I realized not only what was it the case that this incredible information and access was not part of the conversation or even considered as it related to like a cross section of our community, that there was just a huge experience with culture and with just really creating deep relationships that can support the types of experiences and practices that we all want, that those things can happen at the farmers market in some capacity. So it was really a chance to really kind of bring in those that not only would contribute to diverse representation, but actually add to the culture and the environment and the vibe at the market. And not to mention, when we think about vendors and if we are being intentionally inclusive, then we just open up, literally the opportunity for new food products, for spices, growing practices, all of these things, all of these opportunities for us to learn and grow together. I think we miss out on when markets are not focused on making sure that they are creating a welcoming environment.
Yeah, I'm just thinking backwards from that idea. And, a diverse array of vendors means that those vendors have access to land and hopefully at some
Yes,
point access to ownership of land. And that
that's
just is
right.
could be really, hugely changing of our systems, all sorts of systems. Sigrina, can you tell us a bit about the anti-racist toolkit for farmers markets and how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked as the executive director of the Georgia Farmers Market Association until from 2013 until 2020. And the reason that I left was because it was just it as a not so much a farmers market operator, but definitely as an enthusiast and as a supporter and an advocate for farmers and for the availability and access to local food, as well as just our opportunity to create our own terms around how we engage food. When I left, it was not because the work that I was doing wasn't impactful. It was because I just, as a Black woman, was not was not supported in the work. There was no space for me that existed. And so I left, but I didn't go far because I had this existing relationship with FMC. And at that same time, I was having conversations with Nino and a few other coworkers that are at this point like family to me, about what we were seeing in at markets and in communities, and just some of the very, very real challenges. As we all know, this was during the times of civil unrest involving Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so many incidences, rapid incidences of that just kept what this world and our several communities across the country were grappling with. And those things were happening in at different scales at farmers markets. So, and Farmers Market Coalition, was very clear that there was an issue and a challenge. And so, when the opportunity came and the funding was available, the leadership there made what I feel to be a very bold decision to support the work, and led by folks of color, black folks particular, and to really radically set the stage for us to create conversation, for us to also develop healing, and we did that. And so it was really it's something that we allow to evolve naturally, and it's still evolving. The kind of the foundation of the toolkit, the most important thing was to again, we followed that same line of thinking that we needed a cross section. We needed folks from across the country. We need folks from different disciplines within local food systems. So farmers, food educators, advocates, farmers market operators. We had a variety of those folks, and some of them wore multiple hats. So we really were able to set the stage very early on and develop a kind of to demonstrate and model the opportunity that can, the beautiful things that can come together when you are intentional about making sure that there's a lot of diverse voices at the table.
I kind of love what you're talking about, like wearing many hats does, like of the mental picture I get in my head of like some of the people who are involved in the creation of the toolkit, like literally chef's hat, like head wrap, like gardeners,
Yes.
Like one of those big brim
Yes.
straw hats, like all of the hats
Yes.
that these folks are wearing, and so much expertise and like so much history that folks brought.
We can't forget about Juju's vegetable.
Yes, we cannot forget.
Literal
Like
hat.
literal vegetable hat.
It's got these felt vegetables on it. If you go out and look for some of the work that Juju Harris, who's one of the contributors to the toolkit, has done in education around food, and there's a really great session with Sadrina and Juju talking, like cooking together and talking about the Anti-Racist Farmers Market Toolkit, where Juju's wearing the hat. The hat is very important to the creation of the Anti-Racist Farmers Market Toolkit.
Awesome.
But I also wanted to just jump in and say, like, I think just to draw a connection between what you were talking about when you were talking about your work in farmers markets, Sadrina, and kind of the way that the toolkit was created in terms of like this basis in existing relationships and of trust and accountability. Because, in 2020, from the point of view of the Farmers Market Coalition, as the organization is kind of, like many, many nonprofit organizations across the country, like trying to kind of take this moment of national accountability and be like, okay, what have we not been doing for so long? What have we not been attending to for so long? And how do we make an adjustment to that? And how do we make an adjustment that feels sustainable and that isn't just about saying something now in this moment when it's, what everybody's doing, but is about like making a commitment that's going to last? And the reason I think that like we were able to work with you and make those shifts is partly because, we had as many people who are committed to that those long-term solutions as part of the staff. But in particular, I'm thinking about the relationships that you had with Dar Wolnick and with Rachel Ward, who's now the executive director at Farmers Market Fund in Oregon, which went back to Georgia and were like these really deep, meaningful relationships. You and I met doing the work at Farmers Market Coalition, but those relationships were,
Yes.
years and years, I think maybe even decades old. And so, like, because that was in place, there was a framework for us to do the harder work of like, what does this actually need to look like, instead of kind of having to figure it out all in the moment, which was, as I'm sure we all remember, like a very emotionally charged moment for everybody. And that is something that I think has been a central facet of like, you were talking about like being able to draw on those relationships with people in Atlanta in order to be able to answer the question of like, what's not working here? Why aren't people showing up? And that is something that has shown up in the toolkit too as a major important part of what I think you and the other experts who wrote it were offering to folks as like the way into this work is like building those relationships so that you have that framework for when it's time to do something hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the toolkit, the result of this deep, intentional work to bring equity into this food and farm space, is in one part a document, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something for markets to use to then do the same kind of work themselves. Am I correct in that? And
Yep.
kind of build out. So can you describe a little bit, either one of you, what and I hate to use jargon, but what the rollout has been like and how you got this idea to your member markets and what's that been like? What's happened in the years since this work has been done?
That's a great question, because so much of this work, like I think we've all been in that situation of you pour your heart and soul into creating something, but you also have to pour your heart and soul into getting it to people and to getting it to them in a way they can use it. But I think Sadrina is really the right person to speak to that, because you've been working so directly with so many markets on implementation.
Yeah. So, the thing that I think the greatest challenge with rolling out the toolkit was taking our time creating the toolkit. Because once we announced that we were creating this toolkit, people got extremely excited. Like it was in a period of time where, where people were looking for resources and we were in the middle of COVID. And so the pressure was on, and we knew that that was the exact wrong thing to do because that excitement was kind of rooted in the kind of systems that encourage us to rush and to not consider and not be intentional. So, the first important thing that I really want to stress about how this toolkit maybe is different than other tools and resources that are utilized is that we insisted on taking our time and letting each step inform the next. So, really, an iterative way of approaching every aspect of it. And the rollout was no different. So I would say the first kind of formal way that we talked about the toolkit was at the Intense conference that happens annually in San Diego. Our good friend Kat White leads, that work, and that's where a lot of farmers market folks gather. And so, we were able to have some podcast conversations as well as a presentation, a virtual presentation involving the toolkit. Myself and two other toolkit creators, experts, were had a conversation similar to this. And it was really a wonderful way for us to see and to gauge what the response and what the questions would be around this work. And then beyond that, what we understood was that the toolkit, while it's very robust and we're extremely proud of it, it is not designed to take it off the shelf and just run with it. So we had to create a container where we could introduce it in a deeper way, and maybe even in a way that was specific to communities. So we developed a community of practice model, and we had several markets. We initially did kind of an all call with market leaders across the country who were interested, who had downloaded the toolkit and were interested in learning more about it. And we also use that model with several other groups and organizations, some state organizations that had a specific maybe use or idea or wanted to develop community around this idea of what we call creating spaces of belonging at farmers markets. So that really to me was key, and it took us a good year or so of those intro sessions and the communities of practice to really feel like we had a solid chance at getting this toolkit to be a living active document. And then in the last, I would say, a year and a half, we have been able to develop very intimate relationships with specific markets that have decided that they want to, really reflect the toolkit in their market operations and every aspect of the work that they do. And the toolkit really sets the stage for that. We have all of the different areas of the market experience, or the maybe kind of the standard kind of categories of things to consider when you are running a market and want to run it well. We base the toolkit off of those same 4 areas. And so it was very easy to then just kind of layer in this idea of, expanding our ideas beyond what we may have developed our markets with, and to consider, what does it look like to really be inclusive and to create partnerships that can sustain this market and feed the community, for many, many years to come.
Mm-hmm. Can one of you give us an anecdote or even kind of an imagined scenario about how a market would decide to use the toolkit and then put it into practice? And actually, I love when I was reading the toolkit, this idea of practice instead of like a goal. You're not like magically becoming anti-racist. It's a practice that continues, and that makes me feel at the same time more accessible, but also more, as ongoing important work. So yeah, I just think our listeners might want to hear just sort of an idea of like, what would a market do? Okay, we're going to do this. We've decided whether it's like our individual market managers. Some markets are so tiny that that's the only staff they have, or maybe it's a committee, but it's some really well-intentioned people. They're deciding to do this work, and then what happens?
Nino, do you want to take that?
I can start us off, and I feel like you can
Okay.
take it from there. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, as you're saying, so markets look all kinds of ways and have all kinds of needs. And one of the things about this being a living document is that it can be responsive to that. And the goal is for it to exist in the real life relationships and community that a farmers market operator has, and a farmers market has, in order to be able to respond to the realities of their community and their circumstances. So, but we wanted to design it so that kind of you read the toolkit and you reach out for help. And because it is so deeply based in relationships, and that help can look a lot of different ways. And that can look like, getting local, folks who are locally active in your area to start building relationships with those people, and asking, how you can support them, and creating networks of mutual support, so that if, if, for example, you're a small market in a neighborhood where maybe it's a situation like what Cedrina was describing, where there are many more people of color in your neighborhood that are coming to your market, and you don't know why. And so maybe your first move is to seek out the organizations in your neighborhood who are working with the people of color in your neighborhood, and see what you can do to support them, and how you can connect your organizations and begin building those relationships of accountability. It could also be reaching out to the creators of the Anti-Racist Farmers Market Toolkit and asking for an introduction to the toolkit. We do like workshops, we do talks about the toolkit, and many of the folks who created the toolkit have gone on to develop consultancy practices, or had preceding consultancy practices and then are using that experience in many cases, like, years and years and years of incredible, excellent experience of consulting. So, and some folks have kind of started as a result of beginning this work, and get the reflections of folks who are experts in this, to support your market in how to move forward, doing an audit of like what is happening at your market, what does your market's engagement with anti-racism look like now, what kinds of changes do you want to make, and to have that be really tailored and specific to your needs, and where your community is, because people come into this work with all kinds of levels of personal commitment, in terms of the support systems and networks that they have already, and thinking about that and developing it is, the beginning step. But I think Cedrina can give like some very specific anecdotes about how that has actually worked in practice. So I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love what you said, because I am thinking immediately of the Juneteenth digital campaign that we did just recently, and that can be found on the FMC Instagram page. And what was really special about that is that this idea of tapping into your existing network, or expanding your network, using the toolkit to do that, is something that we were able to really support markets in doing, without them having to like bring us on in a consulting capacity necessarily. But one of the folks so we put kind of an all call out to farmers market operators and leaders through the state network side of things with Farmers Market Coalition. And it was really beautiful to see how, and we had a lot of conversations with folks, like helping them to think about, okay, what are the relationships that you have in your community now that maybe you're not tapped into, that really, you have a resource, you have this incredible market with beautiful food and lots of people. Like how can you create an opportunity to provide support to their efforts, and that aligns so clearly with your desires, or maybe your vision for your farmers market, and then in turn, how can you benefit? And so we did kind of a mix of a couple of different ways of sharing the mic, so to speak, and allowing these markets to really kind of use their relationship with FMC to highlight really beautiful work that's happening in their community. It may or may not have been directly connected to the farmers market,
Mhm.
but it was certainly directly connected to that market or that association's commitment to anti-racism. And doing it around Juneteenth was significant and really beautiful. And I think it was, I thinking specifically about our feature on Portland because I also have been doing some consulting work with Portland around the anti-racist toolkit and helping to make that a really key and pivotal part of their strategic direction of the organization. And so they have an organization, a partnership, and it's not a new one, with an organization called Built Oregon. And it is a organization that supports entrepreneurship, not specifically farmers markets, but they had a relationship where that organization was able to set up booths at their market. And so the opportunity to feature that partnership and to really consider, wow, these are additional ways that we can amplify and elevate their presence at the market. And there's also some additional ways that, that they can maybe get even more plugged in and understand like how someone can be featured at our market at the market and then kind of um maybe go into or into matriculate into a full vendor relationship.
Mhm.
And actually one of their current vendors went through the Built Org, actually current vendor and board member went through that program. He didn't go through it to become a part of the Portland Farmers Market, but he could at least see how, if that intentionality were there, that pathway, would have been that much more smoother, even for him. So I think that was a huge win for us.
Yeah, it makes me think about the idea that the people who are putting on farmers markets, they're already doing this really important work around food access and food systems, and they're probably maxed out at capacity. And what we're asking them here is to slow down and look around and say, is my market reflecting my community and what's missing? And so I guess what that's making me wonder is there a portion of this work that allows these time-strapped organizations to build capacity to grow for
Yeah.
this part of what's going on?
That's a great and important question. And it makes me also just want to like share and note that like farmers market operators really want to do this work. And this is,
Yeah.
this is coming from the field and from a desire and markets often have kind of like a dual mission that is on the one hand supporting an economic relationship between local farms and consumers, customers, shoppers, um, de- that sometimes is about urban rural connections, sometimes is just about getting food into communities. There's many reasons for that kind of, or like ways we frame that economic relationship, and a relationship that is a mission that is about creating communities of belonging, as Sadrina has like so I think effectively and meaningfully phrased it. But those two are not in conflict, but they often feel
Right.
like they pull in different directions. And for farmers market operators, having both of them be centered, I think for many, many farmers market operators, that's the ideal, that's the goal. And operators have been recognizing for a long time that, there is this disconnect between the communities that they're aiming to serve and the who's showing up at market. And so this, in some ways, like I just sort of want to lay out that this is capacity building,
Mm.
and that creating a space where this work can happen helps to build capacity because it's meeting a need that operators and that their communities see and recognize, and like and just like not having half your community in your market is a problem. And so it's
Yeah.
like capacity building to be able to
Right.
actually see pathways to get them there and to let them know that they're welcome and wanted, and then you have access to this whole group of people that you didn't have access to before. That is capacity building. And also, your point about time is well taken by any operator or anybody else who has to run events and spaces and put things on. It's hard work, and this is a job that is often not seen or recognized. Even sometimes, you say you're a farmers market operator at a dinner party. Like, Cedrina, what happened when you said you were a farmers market manager at dinner parties and you were doing that work?
Like, whoa.
Yeah, it's really, I even my own father was just like, that's real cute. That's cute work.
Oh, man.
You're like, cute to the tune of I got 4 hours of sleep last night.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I got in a fight with a tent. So it's like
I do want to, obviously everyone can hear you guys, laughing now. And I just want to point out that to our listeners who are not seeing our faces throughout this conversation, you guys have been smiling. And it just feels like there's real delight in this work.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And yeah. So I guess I just want to call attention to that as well and see if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm just coming back from a visit to New Orleans. I want to say vacation, but I can't really call it that because I feel like it was like definitely like it was healing and all of the really wonderful things that a vacation can be, but it was so much more than that. And I think that one of the things that I love about living in the South and being raised in the South is like we are very, very clear that there is important work still to be done. And because it is in our face all the time. And what I love about how we collectively, and I say we as an FMC, have approached this work, and as well as the subject matter experts that designed the toolkit with me, we have to seize those moments of joy because the work can be so heavy. And so laughing as much as we can. One of our first, kind of recommendations actually to farmers markets and that intro session that we did virtually at the Intense conference was all about music and the impact that DJs and live music has, in open spaces and community spaces. And that is something that we learned by studying and talking about the toolkit and creating the toolkit that was relatively unique to Black-led farmers markets. And so of all the things that we talked about, it was that joy that we experience at the market that our non-Black counterparts were so excited to learn more about. So I love that you picked up on the joy, and it's very real, and it's very important as we're dealing with really, 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 really tough topics.
Absolutely. This could be a question for either of you, but as a community space, can you talk a little bit about how markets differ from the other places where people are accessing food?
I love that question. And I'm sure we both have things to say to it. Markets are direct. They're a direct market for the vegetables and produce and value-added products that producers are creating. And so our food system is built for a lot of purposes. I would say feeding people healthy food at a price that they can afford, and that can support and sustain the life of the person who's creating it is not what our food system in general is built for. But farmers markets are aiming to be built for that, and so that's we talked about those dual missions of economics and community, and those two together. Many farmers markets are really trying to create spaces where the producers, whether that's farmers or value-added producers or folks who are bringing prepared food, are able to bring away a living wage and be remunerated for their work, and people are able to come into that space, get the food that they need, be able to have a relationship with the people who are creating it, and know that food is local in many cases, and have a relationship with the folks who are creating it. And I think there's a persistent myth that farmers markets are more expensive than grocery stores, which depending on the product, it can be true, but it also is largely, especially right now, given the inflation at grocery stores, not true. And so it's a space where, you can often find the things that you need in season, like get these fresh, nutritious foods, and often get the benefit of community connections while you're at it. You know, in many cases, the focus on that community, that vision of community building, means that the goal of the farmers market is to provide these services to you and to the vendors that they're serving in a way that that is really thinking about, like, what are you getting out of it and trying to meet your needs. And that leads to a whole lot of that just leads to policies that are put in place with that in mind, as opposed to maybe profiting shareholders or something like that. But yeah, Sadrina, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I just think about the relationships that are possible. I try to pay attention when I go into grocery stores to, who I'm interacting with, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so transactional
Mm-hmm.
that it's difficult. I
Right.
mean, I'm actually like disturbed when I go into grocery stores at this point, because I'm so used to having just a very clear connection with people that are growing and preparing my food, and just have developed such a high level of regard and respect for the intentionality and the sacrifice that they make. And in many cases, at my local farmers market, they harvest, the morning before they come to market,
Mhm.
and so the ability to get food that is that fresh is just such a privilege, such a
Mhm.
gift. And so I think that the opportunity there is substantial. I cannot wait to get to the market this week and get cucumbers. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
I'm just like dying over it. I just have to have some cucumbers. But so that level of enthusiasm and excitement that I just don't have about going to the local grocery, is something that I think is because of the connection and the very deep relationships that I've formed at the farmers market. We're all there for the same reason. Ultimately, we all want to feed ourselves and our families good food. And so if we can be intentional about coming together around that, once we're together, then the magic just happens.
I love what you're saying about cucumbers too, Sadrina. It's reminding me that it's about to be peach season here. And just like, I mean, there's so many wonderful things about farmers markets. Obviously, I'm a huge fan because this is the work that I do and have done for many years. But like, the way that the farmers market turns every fruit and vegetable into like a holiday. You're just like, it's cherries next week. I cannot wait. I will be planning a party. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's this idea of scarcity and abundance and seasonality that we
Mm.
really get closer to when we're observing the people who are growing our food. Nina, you mentioned very early on about SNAP, and I wanted to see if you could talk about how, eaters who are using that kind of assistance to get food can even make more out of the farmers market.
Yeah, absolutely. So many farmers markets, and there's a whole lot of history behind kind of how this happened. Briefly, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program used to be known as food stamps, and that was because it was actual pieces of paper. And when that was happening, which was in the 20th century, way back then, you could use them at farmers markets, right? You didn't need special equipment to redeem them. But as the electronic benefits transfer system, so the cards that most people use for benefits, or everyone uses for benefits now, were slowly introduced. At the time, right? This is like the late 90s. There wasn't Wi-Fi, there weren't like easy connections so that farmers markets could set up machines in order to swipe those cards if you're running a market that just pops up once a week in an outdoor space. And so there was this huge loss of these people who had been part of these farmers market communities and could no longer shop at the farmers market. And farmers markets responded over time to that loss by kind of trying to find ways to invite shoppers who were shopping using benefits back into the market. And one of the ways that operators came up with was this idea of nutrition incentives. So to make to incentivize folks to spend their money at the market using their EBT cards by doubling that money or adding additional dollars onto that money, because partly to fight what we were talking about that stigma of like farmers markets being too expensive, and partly just as an invitation and a welcome, and also because if you like in some cases, like it may be it may be more expensive than the grocery store that is near your house, and we want you here, and so we want to make sure that that's clear. And so incentive programs can be used to incentivize all kinds of things, but over the course of the last few years, incentive programs have really gone mainstream, and now there is federal funding through the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program for Farm Direct and also grocery brick and mortar operations to support nutrition incentives, and many farmers markets across the country accept SNAP, and not all, but many do accept SNAP, and then an additional large subset of those that accept SNAP also have nutrition incentive programs, which will in some cases double the money that folks are spending. So you'll swipe your card for $20 on your SNAP card, and then you'll get an additional $20 of incentive to spend. And if you are listening to this and you're a person who shops using benefits, definitely great to know about those programs, because there's money out there at farmers markets that you could be using. And we all know that it's never enough. And so having that extra money, can be a real help to people in creating their budgets and in being able to afford like the food that they, you were talking about the way in which you healed yourself in many ways through food, Sadrina, and enabling people to do that when they're on a really restricted budget is also something that I know many operators are hoping for when they do the work to get authorized for SNAP and to get and to become part of incentive programs. So a way of welcoming folks into markets and supporting them to be able to shop in the way that they want.
Mm-hmm. Sadrina, now that the toolkit is out in the world, can you tell us a little bit about what other projects are getting your attention?
Oh my goodness, so many. I'm very interested in the experience of Black people as it relates to land. You kind of mentioned that earlier. And so really thinking about, just that relationship to growing food and the experience of Black farmers, I think is something that I'm very, very interested in. And also there's growing conversation around, especially in Georgia. We have just historic, and landmark decisions. The Pickford case specifically is, I think, worth everyone understanding and learning about. But it really talks about the systematic way that Black land owned by Black folks was taken. And it's not limited to farmland, but I think it's a very consistent kind of phenomenon that that is also connected to redlining and so many challenges, right? That I think really speak to some of those deeper issues, right? So I feel like now that we have this resource in the toolkit where we can have these open conversations, how can we take that kind of receptiveness that we are experiencing and the grace that we give each other as we're navigating it and deal with some of these deeper, more complex issues?
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Nina, this is the 25th anniversary of National Farmers Market Week. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about this annual celebration and how it supports farms and farmers markets?
Absolutely. Yeah. So National Farmers Market Week, started in 1999, and it was proclaimed by the USDA at that point. It has since become something that's managed and supported by the Farmers Market Coalition. The USDA still proclaims it every year, and so I think Congresses did their first proclamation last year, and we expect another one this year, I believe, which is very exciting. And many municipalities, cities, states do proclamations to support National Farmers Market Week. So it starts with, it started with these proclamations, but what it's really about is creating a space to celebrate the work of farmers market operators and to celebrate what farmers markets do in their communities. And of course, like, we want people to be thinking about and remembering and planning to come to their farmers markets all year round. But what this week is about is for every market that celebrates it to be able to just kind of like, through that celebration and that joy we were talking about, make the case for their farmers market, and why it's such a fantastic place to be. And when we think about this, like, sometimes you're talking to your customers and to people who you want to come in and shop at your farmers market. And sometimes you're talking to folks that you just need to see that your farmers market is there, whether that's like the town council, or whether that is potential other organizations that you could be partnering with. And every year, the Farmers Market Coalition, offers some messaging that farmers markets can use. And we really see this week as like a collective, a space in which the whole collective of farmers markets, all of these fantastic individual or small, networks of organizations across the country that are doing this work in relatively kind of like isolated groups all year long, come together and make this really big noise where everybody's looking. And, we use hashtags. We talk about it for weeks and months ahead of time. It's a great time to put on a party at your farmer's market, invite people to come and experience the feeling of being there, and take a lot of pictures that you can then use on your social media roll the whole rest of the year to show people how much fun it is to be there, gather information about why people come and why people love it. And farmers markets use this in all sorts of ways, and we have created a toolkit for National Farmers Market Week. So this is another toolkit. We love making toolkits because we are people who need and use tools. The National Farmers Market Week toolkit comes out every year and is updated every year with tools that farmers market operators can use to put on their own celebration. So they can really customize it to what works for them and what they need to do. And then we use this national platform to lift up whatever it is that they choose as the kind of best focus for their celebration, and make that visible all over the country.
There are also really good tattoos that
Yes.
farmers market.
Yeah, the temporary I love farmers market tattoos are very popular.
Yes.
Yeah, they look really good on baby cheeks.
They do.
Citrina, you mentioned Juneteenth as a really great opportunity to call attention to the work that you've been doing with the coalition. This like extra emphasis, this louder bullhorn that's happening during Farmers Market Week, does that give a similar opportunity, do you think?
Absolutely. Actually, we behind the scenes, we've got something really special planned for Farmers Market Week, tied to, to the toolkit and to the work. Really, I think is more important at this point. But yeah, we've got something up our sleeve.
Cool.
So I'm not going to give it away.
Nice.
I love
I'm
that.
excited.
Teaser. Okay. Wow.
Yes.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you guys that you think would be fun or necessary to talk about?
Well, I just like going off of what you just said, and I won't give it away either, Cedrina, but that I think this just points to, I think, overall, like making, National Farmers Market Week and the Anti-Racist Farmers Market Toolkit are not two separate things. When we're talking about the work that farmers markets are doing, we're talking about centering communities, and that means centering equity. And so this is something that moves through all the work we do, but not just like, not just magically because we create these relationships of accountability for each other and make that happen. And so I think it is going to be a really fantastic opportunity to talk about the equity work that farmers markets are doing all across the country, and that's part of the work that we're doing as farmers markets writ large across the country. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, Cedrina, and bringing that up.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like to add, and it's something that I forget to say enough because I get so excited about this, I forget just how isolating and lonely doing this work can be, particularly equity focused work, right? It really takes a lot of focus, as well as like, a commitment, right? To coming up against what may be long-standing beliefs and very, especially now we're, in this election season, people have all kinds of thoughts and feelings that come out in public spaces. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really want to remind anyone who's listening is like, I love this and I want to get behind it. Just please, don't go at it alone. We're definitely here to support and help and give yourself lots of space and grace. We're all figuring this out and none of us, there are subject matter experts that, we feel very strongly about their skills and talents, but we're all still learning.
Mm.
So we are here to create community around this idea of creating spaces of belonging, or as Dr. King said, the beloved community. And so we have to take care of ourselves and each other.
Nino, Sigdrina, thank you so much for joining us. We've been listening to Sigdrina Jalal and Nino Budabin McGowan from the Farmers Market Coalition. Thank you for joining us today at Eat, Drink, Think. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to pick up your local edible magazine. You can find show notes for today's episode at ediblecommunities.com.